Good evening. Welcome to the public meeting, the corporate strategic plan of the town of Kirkland Lake at Town Hall, council chambers, and via Zoom. We acknowledge that the town of Kirkland Lake is located on the traditional territory of Algonquin peoples, including Beaver House First Nation and unceded territory of other Indigenous peoples. We recognize the presence of the Algonquin, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Cree, and Métis people in our community since time immemorial and honor their stewardship and care of these lands. We hereby affirm our continued commitment and responsibility to reconciliation. Call to order and moment of silence. Item number 2, declaration of pecuniary interest. None seen. So just as a reminder, there is no questions from council at this meeting. Any questions can be forwarded to either the CAO or posed at the next regular meeting where the report will be given. Item number 3, corporate strategic plan. Alan Smith, Chief Administrative Officer, and Stephen Leachty, Project Manager, Capital Park Consulting Incorporated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In October, council retained Capital Park Consulting to help develop the corporate strategic plan, which would form the priorities over the next 3 years. Since then, Capital Park Consulting has been researching, has also been getting input from the public, from staff, and from council in helping forming these priorities. They've also held workshops yesterday with council and this morning with senior management. And I'm not going to turn it over to Mr. Steve Leachy, project manager for this initiative, who will then provide a more detailed summary and update of the steps I've taken so far.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back here again today. Just word of warning that anyone who was here yesterday or watched the proceedings online, there's not going to be a whole lot that's new, but there will be a couple of things. So if you could start the PowerPoint, please.
Not at the beginning of the presentation.
The beginning, that's always a good place to start. The agenda for the afternoon, I'm going to give a background, a little bit expanded on what Alan just told you about, give you some of the results of the stakeholder engagement activity that we have conducted. There is currently an online survey underway, which is still open. We're hoping to get some more responses before it's closed. Yesterday, we arrived at some draft strategic priorities, which will give a few details and some of the strategic actions and the desired outcomes and strategic key performance indicators, some of the discussions we had this morning. Next slide, please. I've already been introduced, so we'll go to the next slide after that. One thing to point out right at the beginning is that this is a corporate strategic plan as opposed to a community strategic plan. So a corporate strategic plan focuses on the internal organization goals, while a community strategic plan is broader. It's looking at broader needs of the community, the aspirations of the town's residents. That doesn't mean there isn't crossover. There's obviously quite a bit of crossover, but the main focus and the main purpose of a corporate strategic plan is to guide internally what the staff and the council should be working on over the next 3 years. In some ways, it's very easy methodology. You just ask 3 questions. Where are we today? Where do we want to be? And how are we going to get there? You can see there's lots of activities that you do to try to answer each of those questions. They mentioned some of that, and then we look at the documentation that we have in-house. We look at documentation from provincially and nationally from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, provincial governments, federal governments. We interview stakeholders. Now, if you go on to the next slide, we can cover some of those in a bit more detail. Oh, sorry, I forgot about Dr. Martin. I told you a minute ago that it's fairly easy. You just have to answer 3 questions. But Dr. Martin, who was recognized a few years ago as the #1 management thinker in the world, said it's not as easy as you might think. And you have to make choices. If it was just going around the room writing down a list of what everybody would like, that would be easy. But then you really wouldn't accomplish anything because you wouldn't be focused. So you need to decide you're gonna do some things, and there are other things that you're gonna have to defer to a later date. Dr. Martin, spent many years as the Dean of the Rotman School of Business at the University of Toronto. And then he founded the Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto. It was a corporate think tank, and one of their major clients was the province of Ontario for quite a few years. So far in this project, we've had quite a few virtual meetings with the CAO and members of his staff. We've interviewed every member of Kirkland Lake Town Council. We've interviewed every management member of corporation. We've had focus groups with key stakeholders. We still have one more to finish. We reviewed various documents, both internal and external to the town. And we've also reviewed strategic plans from similar municipalities. And as was mentioned, we had a workshop with council yesterday. The #1 thing that it came out of, which we refreshing to see, it came out of the stakeholder engagement or the interviews, is an understanding that the corporation council need to stay focused. And the #1 challenge we find with a lot of strategic plans, both in their development and their implementation, is that the municipalities just not stay focused. And if you lose focus, you'll find that you really don't accomplish a great deal. And we love this quotation, which we are going to use on future projects, came from one of the council members here. Diffused light is not very useful, but focused light will cut through steel. In terms of the highest priorities, it's pretty clear. #1 priority is infrastructure, and that includes roads, it includes water, wastewater, sidewalks. The biggest issue, I think, for the general public is roads, because they drive on the roads every day. But a bigger issue is actually what's under the roads, the water and the wastewater. And you have reports, you have studies from, experts and engineers who have told you that a lot of your infrastructure is 90 years old. It wasn't designed to last 90 years and hasn't lasted 90 years, and it's going to continue to get worse. So it is essential that something be done about infrastructure. It's absolutely the #1 priority for future years. You also need growth. A town that is not growing is going to suffer. You will not be able to have sustainable growth or significant growth without the infrastructure. So that's why we're saying with the infrastructure, that can lead to growth. And they're also saying that if you have the infrastructure and you have the growth, it's going to make it much more feasible to have economic diversification. It's recognized that this is primarily a mining town. And as a mining town or a resource sector town, there's a boom and bust cycle that happens all the time. You can have higher lows if you have some economic diversification. So, but if you were a company looking to come in here, perhaps open a store or open a restaurant or something like that, and you're looking at the population that either isn't increasing or is declining, let's say that there are other places I can go with a brighter future. But with infrastructure, with growth, economic diversification becomes much more viable. That doesn't mean these are the only priorities, but we see these as the top 3. We have some interim results of the online survey. We typically find that what we get in the interim results do not vary significantly from what we get in the end results. This is probably a fairly good reflection of what we'll see at the end. One of the questions was, how would you rate the overall quality of life in Kirkland Lake? And you'll see that roughly 75% of your population think it's either good or very good. And that says something about how much people enjoy living here and appreciate the values of Kirkland Lake. And actually, it's quite typical of most people in the smaller centers. They tend to be happier than the reason people in the larger centers. I don't think the people in larger centers really understand that, but that's okay. That's their problem. Next slide. This slide is a little bit difficult to interpret. How has the quality of life in Kirkland Lake changed over the last 5 years? And it's practically a dead heat between between it stayed the same or it worsened. Now, on one hand, you can look and say, well, that's not very good if, you've got over 40% of the people think it got worse. But then you wonder if you ask that same question provincially or nationally, you'd probably find that a higher percentage would say life has gotten worse. So we're not sure how much of this is really a reflection of local circumstances and how much is more a reflection of what's just happening across the country. Another question was, how satisfied are you with council and administration with the governance and management of the town? And you'll see that almost exactly half were positive, on the positive side of the scale. Almost exactly a third were on the negative dissatisfied side of the scale, and 1/6 were neutral. That's not great, although as we've noted, there may be some provincial or federal leaders who would be happy with those results, but it also shows something to work towards improving. Another question was about all the programs and services that you receive from the corporation. How do you rate the value that you're getting back for your tax dollars? Again, it's in the positive, but not by a huge margin. Although, again, if you were looking at that provincially or nationally, I suspect your results are better than them, but you should aim higher. There was an open-ended question that asked the respondents to select up to 5 of priorities that they should be at the top for council and staff to work on over the next 3 years. And you notice those little squiggly marks in front of each one of those numbers. That's because those are approximate. Sometimes it was difficult to really determine where something should go because it was open-ended. For example, the number 1 priority was roads and infrastructure. Sometimes people said roads, sometimes they said water, sometimes they said water and wastewater, sometimes they just said infrastructure. So if the same person had said roads, water, wastewater, we only counted that as 1 vote for roads and infrastructure. And so someone else counting it a little bit differently might have come up with a slightly different number, but this is a fairly good reflection of what the results were. And you'll see that roads and infrastructure, there were 92 responses at the time that we did the interim results. People were allowed to skip a question and 4 had skipped that question. So out of 88, 80 of them said roads and infrastructure, which indicates very strongly that people understand the issues. People understand that the infrastructure needs work. Waste management, I think, was a bit of a surprise that come in second. We think that has to do with the recycling programs. That one of the complaints that we heard was waste is picked up once a week and recycling once every 2 weeks. That people want to get rid of their garbage as quickly as possible. If you reverse that, it would have some of your residents who would be pleased. Because we'd be more inclined to put things out that they can get rid of that week, so they'd be more inclined to recycle. If you look at this list, and it's quite a long list, even the ones at the bottom are not bad priorities. It's just, they're not ranked as highly by the respondents as what the council and the staff need to work on, but they're all worthy. In some ways, this is a similar question. It was, what are the challenges, the top 3 challenges for the corporation? Again, roads came out first, but this time we did segregate between roads and infrastructure because they tended to. Taxes also came in, which I think comes in nationally, provincially, locally. And you can see the list there. Next slide, please. This is from a consultant who, better known than Capital Park Consulting, more books published. But he talks about the things that you need to do to have a successful and useful strategic plan. And as you go down the list, a clear grasp of external factors that was provided to the corporation in the first interim report about some of the things that are happening in terms of high interest rates and high inflation. An assessment of organizational strengths and limitations, that's been done. It's an inclusive approach where you can see we're trying to include all the members of council, all of the members of staff. I forgot to mention that we also did a survey of the municipal staff, so they all had an opportunity for input. The public has had an opportunity and is having an opportunity through the online survey, and then the focus groups, and also a public meeting like we're having here today. You need senior leadership and involvement in an empowered committee. Look around the table, you're seeing that. A sharing of responsibility between the council and the staff. Learning from best practices, and that's a lot of what we did yesterday at our workshop. Clear priorities and an implementation plan. We came up with some of the priorities yesterday, which I'll discuss in a minute. And this morning we worked with the senior management team on an implementation plan. And you need patience. and you need commitment, and you need an openness to change. The last point I'd like to point out is that it's important to differentiate between planning and strategy. And one of the articles that Dr. Martin wrote is that planning is comfortable, strategy is not. And the example that I'll give is planning is where you just say, we're gonna do this particular project. And so you assign responsibility, you set a timeline, you set a budget, you look for milestones, deliverables. But you can often have something like that, that everything is done exactly according to plan, but it doesn't work. And the example that I typically use is a client of ours that was a community college and not Northern, but their strategic priority was to grow their enrollments in all of their programs. So one of their strategic actions was to start 3 new diploma programs. And the second strategic action was to start 2 new apprenticeship programs. And they planned it all out, and it went perfectly. They gave all these responsibilities to develop the curriculum, to hire the staff, to procure the equipment. Everything got done on time, may have been a little bit over budget here and there, but more or less things went very well, except they didn't attract any additional students or any additional apprentices. And that was the problem with their strategy, not their planning. Their strategy did not focus on the right programs. You focused on the ones that nobody else had. Turns out there's a reason nobody else had them. Instead of focusing on the ones that were going to be in most demand, by their students, prospective students, and by their employers. Next slide, please. We spent some time yesterday talking about mission and vision. The mission is basically, why does the corporation exist? What's the purpose for the town council and this building here and the people that work here? The vision is supposed to extend your mission into the future to an ideal state. What are you working towards? So on the next slide, we put on the left side of the screen the attributes of a great vision statement. It's grand, it's uplifting, it's inspirational, and it's not supposed to be easy to achieve. On the right, we have some sample vision statements that we think are pretty powerful. And the first one is Oxfam, a just world without poverty. You understand in a very few words what it is that Oxfam is aiming for, what their ideal future state. The next one's somewhat dated. It was from 1980, Microsoft, a computer in every desk and in every home. For those of us who can remember back to 1980, that seemed like a pretty grand vision at the time. Now we sort of look at it and say, well, you blew past that one. Resident Doctors of Canada, best training, healthy residents, unparalleled care. IKEA, a better everyday life for the many people. And Transportation Association of Canada, transportation that makes Canada safe, healthy, and prosperous. So on the next slide, the left side of the screen is exactly the same as the previous slide. It's the attributes that we're trying to go for. The right side has what you have in your current strategic plan, which is the right environment. And after some discussion, we thought that maybe we needed to expand on that a little bit. So what's proposed coming out of that is to be the right environment for you, diverse, thriving, and efficient. And that's supposed to appeal to everybody. That's why the 4U. Similar with the mission statement, on the left side, we have the attributes that make a great mission statement. The bottom point on there is that it should be as succinct as possible and fit on a t-shirt. That's not always possible. What we usually say to clients, if you can get at least one of your mission statement or vision statement to be short, that's good. If you can get both to be short, that's better, but not essential. So some of the sample mission statements that we liked. First one from Humane Society, celebrating animals, confronting cruelty. Similar to the Oxfam one, it tells you why that organization exists, what their purpose is. The next one we have not put on there, which organization it is, to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. It seems pretty arrogant, is one way to put it. Ambitious is another way. That again is Microsoft. Since they blew past their vision statement of putting a computer on every desk and in every home, they're now working on empowering every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. And I think you can say they're doing a somewhat effective job. So some of the others we have are from the New York Public Library, from Life is Good, and from Tri-County Mennonite Homes. Give a bit of a detail about the Tri-County Mennonite Homes. It is a not-for-profit organization in Tri-County is Regional Waterloo, the County of Perth, and the County of Oxford. They have 2 seniors communities with continuums of care with assisted independent living, supported living, assisted living, and long-term care, and 7 group homes. Their previous mission statement was about a paragraph long, all kinds of subordinate clauses. You had to stop and take a breath a couple of times to get through it. In the long-term care sector, the staff are required in their annual mandatory training to study the mission statement of their employer once a year, every year. They'd had that mission statement for 12, 15 years. When they checked with it in the annual mandatory training, when the new plan was being developed, and asked who knew what it was. Of the 325, 350 employees, no one knew it. It was too long. It wasn't memorable. When it got changed to making every day matter, it was interesting when that was being tested, the staff thought it was directed towards them. The residents thought it was directed towards them. The families thought it was directed towards the residents. Eventually, penny drop, this is supposed to apply to everybody. And they're now well over 90% of staff knowing what the mission statement is when they do their mandatory training, which makes it a lot easier. Next slide, please. So again, the left side of the screen is the same what you saw in the previous slide, the attributes. The right side is the current mission statement. The corporation is a model of public service done right, and taxpayers have the confidence in what we do and the value they're getting for their taxes. We thought there was some room for improvement, shorten it, which is always better, and to make sure that it's more comprehensive. It's not just on the financial aspects, but also the quality of life, the environment to grow, sustainability. So the hope is that the proposed model, or the proposed new statement, to be a model of public service done right with an environment to grow, will be more comprehensive, more inclusive. This is a graphic that was taken from another one of Capital Parks consultants, and it's supposed to illustrate who is responsible. How do you turn your vision into action? So it's a bit difficult to read at the top, but it's the vision statement of another municipality and the mission statement of another municipality. And the 4, the blue, the yellow, the green, and the purple boxes are their 4 pillars, or the 4 strategic priorities. And below that are the strategic goals and the objectives that they want to achieve from those strategic goals. That is the work that we did yesterday in the planning session with council. And that is primarily the responsibility of council. The bottom 2 lines are primarily the responsibility of staff. And that's to determine which projects or initiatives they're going to have to meet the strategic goals and objectives, and how they're going to measure the success. And so that's what we're working on now, are those 2 aspects. When we develop the strategic priorities, we recommend to clients that you typically have, they're called different things. Sometimes they're called pillars, sometimes they're called strategic priorities. That's frankly what we prefer to call them. But when we're doing the planning, we tend to call them baskets, because there's a number of initiatives or topics that you want to group together. And so baskets, people seem to understand what that means. And we recommend 3 to 6 for finding that most clients now, probably because of a recognition to stay focused, are typically going with 3 or 4. And so yesterday we selected 4, which are on the next slide. That's infrastructure, vibrant and prosperous community, sustainable core services, and service excellence. So next slides describe each of those in a bit more detail. These are just the issues that need to be addressed under these strategic priorities. These are not worded as strategic actions, but they will be in the strategic plan. Because this wording is supposed to give very clear instructions to staff. What are you supposed to work on for the next 3 years? And so these are in no particular order. But roads and sidewalks, water and wastewater, asset management, fleet management, and a new fire hall. Excuse me. The next strategic priority, vibrant and prosperous community, it's quite a bit broader. Covers housing, covers economic development, economic diversification, growth, improved business climate, leveraging public spaces. It's supposed to make life better for everyone who lives here, and better in a sustainable manner. So there's lots of room for projects under this one. The third one is sustainable core services. As opposed to infrastructure, these are the services that are provided. One of the things that was discussed was the need to look at what are core services and what are non-core services. And if there are non-core services that the municipality is not legally required to be in, are there others that can deliver those same services as well or better than the municipality? And that the municipality focus on the core business that they have to do. Snow removal is an issue. I suspect it wouldn't have been as big an issue in July as it is, right now. But, you know, there's a desire to have the snow removal improved. Road and sidewalk maintenance, that seems to be one of the top of mind, and I suspect that that is 12 months of the year, to have better roads and better sidewalks. There's a desire to have a transit service, so one of the things to look at is, how viable is it, what's it gonna take, what's it gonna cost, and can we make it work? And fleet management, which, the town already has a fleet management, program, but there's always ways to enhance it. And I know we have other clients that they're looking at their fleet management programs and collecting data so that they're making a lot more of their decisions on the condition of the equipment and how it's being used and the maintenance cost as opposed to just age. So that's always going to be a work in progress for every municipality. And finally, service excellence. First one we have on this list is streamlining processes. What we hear from residents is when they apply for something, it's very disappointing to them when they're told what, just no, or no, you can't do it, and this is why. What they would like to hear is, what do I need to do to get approval? And so, and can you make the process as streamlined as possible? Don't make me go through 12, 15, 20 steps. Get it down to the minimum number of steps to get approved. Next one is employer of choice, and that covers a lot of things. It's very difficult, I think, for any employer in the town of Kirkland Lake to compete against the mine in terms of salary and benefits. But there are other things that appeal to people that make them want to work in an organization. In fact, the studies show that, you know, salary is important initially. It's not what makes people stay, not makes people get engaged in their work and enjoying their work. There are other things which they want a good work environment. You know, they want to feel appreciated. You want to feel they have some control and that what they're doing is meaningful. So I know that this is going to be a high priority for the town staff to come up with identifying the things they need to do to be an employer of choice and to stay as an employer of choice. Of course, you have to be financially sustainable for any of this to work. So that's always going to be a key goal. Technology is changing all the time. There are new technologies that allow every organization to be more efficient, more effective. So they always need to be on the lookout for what there is and finding ways to implement them. And finally, improving communications and stakeholder engagement. I think in any satisfaction survey that's done anywhere in any sector, communications is always one of the biggest sources of discontent. So it's always an ongoing process to try to work on that, but it's something which you need to be constantly working on. Do the best you can. This next graphic was taken from the Ontario Municipal Benchmarking Initiative. That was provincially funded and I believe was carried out by Queen's University with some partners. They took a look at the key performance indicators, or what should municipalities be looking at for their measurements of success. And you'll see that they've actually suggest that you look at it from 4 different perspectives. The impact on the community, the service levels, the efficiencies, and the customer service measures. And that's something which we're working with staff now to come up with what are the best KPIs for Kirkland Lake. And there's no shortage of ones to choose from. I think we're looking at well over 100 options. They're not all suitable. It's not all practical. Well, we'll try to select our ones which it's not a huge amount of work to gather because you don't, we know there are municipalities that will spend $500,000 setting up their KPIs. That's not realistic for a smaller municipality. We want ones that are going to be meaningful, but they're also not going to be expensive to set up or to maintain. Just should point out too, it's interesting that in the OMBI initiative where they came up with the 4 different perspectives, we also say to clients, when you're looking at a strategic plan, take a look at what your strategic priorities are and your actions are from 4 perspectives. The perspective of your customer, or in this case, your residents and your business owners, the perspective of the staff who work for the municipality, the perspective of your internal processes. Are you getting better? And finally, the sustainability aspect, both financially and environmentally. And finally, this slide explains how the corporate strategic plan should be used. It should be the framework for all decision making. It's integrated into all of the initiatives, all of the projects that the town has. The senior management team working on their operational plans will bring that to council every year. showing what they're gonna be working on and how it's tied into the strategic plan. And then we'll report regularly. And so typically we find that some of the actions they would report on quarterly, some they may report on annually. And those reports go to council, but they're also available to the public. And that, next steps. We still have a little bit of work to do before we're finished. I gave you a very preliminary review of the online data. There are many more questions that I didn't cover. We're gonna have more results for the questions that I did cover. We will be doing a full analysis of the survey after it's closed. We're working right now on the template for the operational plans. We have to take the material that we have from yesterday's workshop and turn that into the actual draft corporate strategic plan, which will come back to council to review. Based on the comments from council, we will amend that and bring it back to council then for final approval. And now I can say, have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. So item number 4, confirmation of notice. Madam Clerk, how is notice given?
Notice of the public meeting was given in accordance with the town of Kirkland Lake's notice bylaw 2247 by publishing the said notice on the town's website 14 days in advance as of December 5th, 2023. Supplemental notice was published through the town's various social media streams and within daily local radio broadcasters. I always do that since December 5th, 2023.
Thank you. Item number 5, correspondence received. Madam Clerk, was there any correspondence received?
And Madam Mayor, I confirm no correspondence was received by the office clerk.
Thank you. Item number 6, questions from registered members of the public. Madam Clerk, has anyone registered to provide comments electronically?
Madam Mayor,
That's you.
yeah, Madam Mayor, I confirm that no one has reached the office of clerk to register or to request to participate in electronically in a public meeting.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public here this evening that wish to provide comments to be considered in the development of the town's new corporate strategic plan? If so, please come forward to the podium, state your name and address clearly so the clerk may record that. And the clerk will be taking notes from all participants. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. Danny Soroshin, 93 4th Street. And Jen, before you start the clock, could I say to everybody, Merry Christmas? And all the best to you in the new year. And I hope I still have some friends after I do this. Thank you yesterday for your effort, watching you on the internet and on a Sunday. Looking forward, snow plowing and snow removal needs a little help. We must supply all the tools to help the works department. Bylaw must have all the vehicles removed promptly. Maybe a night shift for the enforcement. And if we can't use the bylaw enforcement officer, can the CAO deputize the 2 roads foremen to issue tickets? The radio announcement that you guys carry on in the morning, excellent. The only thing is when they talk about the overnight parking, it says your car may be towed. Everywhere else in Ontario, it is towed. No excuses. That would help the staff out big time. Next one. Is anybody in the collective bargaining with your union ever suggested a night shift at the works department? And I just lost some friends over that. Modernizing the equipment on the snowplows. And do we need 2 men for each unit? I know some of the streets are bad. Number 2. 2 or 3 councils ago, the contractor was hired to remove some snow in an area. Councillor Kiley has frequently asked for the price of what that cost us. We still haven't heard of it. No accountability. And number 3, with the asset management plan, why aren't the department heads tracking mileage and hours on vehicles and equipment? Some of them might be very surprised at what the totals. Thank you very much for the short and brief presentation.
Thank you, sir. We do appreciate your input. Is there any other members from the community that would like to share their input with us, please? No members noted. Thank you, everyone. Item number 7, consideration of proposed bylaws. It is, a no vote this evening, just for direction only.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there's no bylaws this evening, it's just both direction, I apologize.
Thank you.
The council received the comments from members of the public surrounding the development of a new corporate strategic plan.
This is the recommendation moving forward. Thank you. And item number 8 is adjournment. Yep, so this concludes the public meeting this evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and braving the weather. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much, everyone.